Well, this is my Grizzly G4003G 12-inch lathe, and I've used it quite a bit. Cleaned it up a few times, but it's been a while and it was overdue for a cleaning. I just turned down a whole bunch of pipe, Schedule 80 pipe that was real rusty, nasty on the outside, and I just turned down 15 of those to polish them up and get all the rust and old paint and crap off of them. And that was just really nasty. That little teeny fine dusts of rust just got everywhere. And like I said, it was due for a cleaning anyway, but with that said, I didn't want to leave it sit any with that rusty crap on there. So I've just spent a couple, 3 days cleaning it up, and I spent the longest period of time on the threading lead screw. Now, I haven't ever used that. I haven't ever done any threading. And I have cleaned that up. I cleaned it up when I got the lathe. When I brought it out and put it in service, I cleaned everything up because it had the dried up bilge oil that they put on it for corrosion proofing and stuff. And I thought I had it all cleaned up, but that real fine rust dust just got into everything and just got packed in. And I spent probably 5 hours just trying to get that lead screw cleaned up. I would turn it on and engage the lead screw and hold wire brush in there to clean it up, and some paper towels soaked in paint thinner, and I finally put a screwdriver down and got it in the threads itself, and it just took multiple passes to get that cleaned up. And then I took the cross slide, got it all cleaned up, and the tool holder, I had to take it all apart and get it cleaned up. Like I said, that rusty dust just went into everything. The last thing that I've got to clean up is this chuck. I got this 3-jaw chuck, and it's a chuck that came with the lathe, and for me it's worked just fine. It's got a D5 mount on it. I wanted to take it apart before and clean it up inside and stuff, but I couldn't ever figure out how to get it apart. Of course, the first thing I did was take the jaws off and then turn it over, and you got the back. I've got the cam locks here that thread in. I took those out, and then there's these screws here that go into the outside edge of it, the perimeter. There's 3 of those, and then there's 3 screws in here on the inside. I got those out. Well, I couldn't get the doggone thing apart before. Well, I cleaned it up the best I could without taking it apart. I wasn't very happy with that. Oh, anyway, this time I really need to take it apart because it's really cruddy inside now, and that rust and everything got into everything. It's just embedded on this stuff, on these jaws. It's down inside those. I'm going to have to take those apart one at a time, so I don't know if there's any difference between these jaws here and the main jaws. I don't know what the difference are. These are replaceable jaws, or you can turn them around. Anyway, I don't know if these are custom fit to each one of these jaws or not, but I'm going to not take a chance on it and keep them all together, so I'll have to take them apart separately and clean those up. But I couldn't figure out how to get the back plate off of here. I've taken a couple other chucks apart before and not had any problem with them getting apart and getting them back together, but this one I couldn't figure out how to do it. And I've watched several videos online, different people, Mr. Pete, and some others on taking chucks apart, and none of them corresponded to this chuck. I couldn't figure out how to get it. I tapped on it and tried to get it. I didn't want to do anything too drastic to it because it's got a seat. Well, it seats right in here on this taper here on the back of the chuck, but I could see there was a separation right in there. I tried putting a drift on there and just tapping it gently, and I couldn't get it to move. So anyway, I just spent 45 minutes or an hour on YouTube videos trying to find something that corresponded to this one, and I couldn't find any that exactly correlated to this one, so I come back out to try something else. And I noticed there's 2 little tapped holes on here on the edges of this. So I found some screws. I've got one of these packs of Harbor Freight nut screw warehouses, storehouses, whatever they call them, and I found an M5 screw fits into those. What is that? M5, yeah, M5 by 0.08, yeah, 30 millimeter bolts. Anyway, those fit down into those, and by putting those in there, that just pushes that back off of there. So that's how you take that chuck apart. So there it is. That's the nasty mess in there. And then there's set screws in there to hold these gears in for adjusting the scroll, so I can take the, now I can figure out how to get it. But that was the tricky part, was trying to figure out how to get this back plate off from the front plate here. Now we got to figure it out. So there's actually little dimples drilled in here to receive these screws. So anyway, if anybody has got one of these chucks, try to figure out how to get it apart to clean it, that's how you do it. Cool. Boy, that'll make a big difference in that thing. Maybe I had that too close, but here's the backing plate, and here's the bolts, screws that go in it to press that off of there. Okay, this is pretty straightforward now, but just in case you're interested, these are the pinions here. They fit in through the side here. They've got a groove milled into them, and then these real long screws right here, set screws, go down in there, and they're just threaded on the upper part of them where they go in, and that's what retains these in their position. So that's the pinions. Yeah, let's see what we can do here now. And there's the scroll. Everything's a relatively tight fit in there. Nothing sloppy about it. It's dirty. It was greased. Now I greased it from the outside before, but it had grease in it. But of course it's grungy. It's got all kinds of shavings and stuff in it. So definitely due for a cleanup. If I'd have known how to get that apart, I'd have cleaned it up a long time ago to clean up the manufacturing grit and stuff out of it and lubed it up. But now I don't have an excuse to do that anymore, to not clean it up anymore. Alright, well, that's enough. The rest of it's boring, just cleaning this thing up. So I don't have any grease up here anymore. Took everything down either to the hangar or to the shop. So I'll have to go down and get some chassis grease to grease that. Put it back together once I get it cleaned up. The lathe is now officially all cleaned up and ready to get dirty again. So we're leaving in a couple of days to go south for a month and a half. So it shouldn't get dirty again now for a while, but anyway, it's all cleaned up and ready to go. I just got done with the chuck. So I figured out how to get the chuck apart. This seam right in here where this backing plate fits on there is so close together that I couldn't tell it was there when I started until I got it pulled apart a little bit. But once I got that figured out, then it was just pretty much a standard 3-jaw chuck. Well, I got cleaned up inside and put some grease on the pinion gears and on the scroll. It has a rack, kind of a circular rack on the back of it. Anyway, that's all greased up, all put back together. I was kind of worried that maybe I wouldn't get it back together the same way it came apart, because this thing has a mark right here on the headstock and a mark here on the chuck where they balance out. And so this chuck balances pretty good. Runouts on it pretty good right there. And so I was afraid maybe I screwed it up because I took it apart without marking anything. But the chuck, the holes on it are drilled such that they're offset just enough that it has to go back together the same way it come apart. So it's all back together. I cleaned up the lower section of the jaws. These jaws are 2-piece jaws, so when you want to reverse the jaws, you just take a bolt, a screw out of each one of the jaws and flop them around, spin them around. So I was afraid to take them apart on the bench and clean them up there. Well, I cleaned up the lower half of them, assembled everything back together, and then took these apart one at a time. It turned out I didn't need to worry about it so much because these jaws are marked 1, 2, 3 on the secondary jaws here, these outside pieces, the reversible parts of them. But anyway, I got it all cleaned up. It was a nasty mess, but now it's all cleaned up, lubricated up, and she turns pretty smooth now. So I'm happy with that. Anyway, on to the next adventure. I got enough oil in the gear case down here, I guess, because it's leaking out. I put some paper towels in there to absorb that a little bit. It greases, oil's coming out of there. So there's an oil port right here, but that just feeds into a tray up here on the top, and that's got to be filled up. And then there's weep holes in there that go down to the different bearings and to drip on the gears and stuff like that. And if you just squirt a couple of squirts of oil in there, then you're not going to get enough oil in there to get everything lubed, because it's got to drip down through the whole gear case. Now this oil port here just goes into one bearing, one end of a rod in their shaft, and so that one only takes a little bit. And then there's one other oil port down here that you can't hardly see or get to that lubricates this shaft here, the feed screw shaft, and those just take a little bit because they're just going down into one bearing. But this one here, you got to fill that whole tray up with oil and let it leak down through there. Well, anyway, it's all greased up and ready to go. Everything's cleaned up, looks pretty again. Well, it was pretty ugly there for a while with all of that rusty crap on there and stuff. But anyway, now I know how to take that chuck apart and put it back together, and that'll be a lot easier the next time I need to clean that out, which won't be for a couple days. So okay, that's it. Time to quit for the day.